Hello everyone, this is Training Walk Europe community call on 16th of April. This meeting will be recorded and published on YouTube. This meeting is governed by the Kubeflow Code of Conduct. So do we have any new people here on the call who just want to introduce themselves? Just say hello to the community. Feel free to, use chat, or if you don't want to speak, just want to say hello. Otherwise, we can just get started. All right, so in that case, I think today we want to talk about a few things, especially like on this release for Kubeflow Trainer. And I just maybe also want to share some updates for other proposals which is going on. Um, Let me share my screen. 1 second. Right. So I think first of all, like last week was a KubeCon, like 2 weeks ago actually. I think it was extremely success for overall training, working group and overall Kubeflow community. We presented a few talks there on the Kubeflow Summit and also on the main conference. Like few things for the related to training side. One of the things was the cache story, like all this new proposal which is going on from our team. We're working on distributed data cache, and maybe I can, if I have time, I can speak about it at the end of this call a little bit. But I will share like the recording of this proposal if you're interested to actually learn more what our team have built and what we're planning to contribute under Qflow ecosystem. Yeah, but eventually we presented a few updates on the training side. Myself and Yuki, we've been talking about MPI runtime, which is actually we have two new examples using deep speed and MLX while using this MPI runtime. So if you're interested, I created these two notebooks. So the first one for T5 fine tuning, which is using deep speed and MPI, and the second one for MLX. So these notebooks, unfortunately, like this notebook require GPUs to run. I think this notebook runs on 8 V100. But even like on a single node, you should be able to replicate it on your environment. I will link this in our meeting notes. I guess like that's it will be part of the release overall. I think the Torch two of the runtimes, which is like Torch based and API based, probably will be part of the release. Yeah, I think just let me make a note here. Talks. Any questions maybe for the KubeCon or like for talks we've been giving? Any follow-up discussions you want to have on the conference side? All right, so this is Deep Speed Notebook. This is another one for MLX. For those who don't know, like MLX, it's the framework which designed for Apple Silicon. But this notebook actually using the simple MNIST example um, with MLX, and it actually run locally on the Minikube cluster. So if interesting to see, because why it is useful for us, because MLX also using API for distributed communication, which allows us to actually run this distributed training example using our runtime. So we created the custom runtime for MLX, and then we basically using the API plugin to run this example. So this actually you can replicate in your local machine. This is just using Minikube cluster. So if you're interested to take a look how it works, also I encourage you to check these notebooks. All right, so speaking about release, um, so I think we need to make a release of 2.0 sometime this month or early May, because I wish we can actually finally publish the official 2.0 release, and so folks can at least start using our release image, not the image we publish from the master branch. I just like want to ask community, is there any kind of features you want us to include? And after that, I can add my perspective what should be merged before release.
That's only on the API side, right? We're not talking about like SDKs or anything like that.
Yeah, I think so. I think release, yes, we are planning to only publish controllers and runtimes. Yeah, so today we maintain one image for controller and two images for the runtimes, which is also like initializer. Yeah, we maintain also dataset initializer, model initializer. So I guess like the backend components we need to release, right? Um,
Yeah.
yes, I think SDK, yes. I'm planning to actually merge this cap for Kubeflow SDK this week and starting creating a repo from next week. So we can finally decouple the trainer SDK to the separate repo. Um,
Just like on that, I know we have a dedicated one, but do you think it will be feasible to, if we can like publish the SDK before the 2.0 release or with the 2.0 release, so we can publish the SDK to PyPy, which is Python
yeah.
packaging indexing, and like make a proper release so people can pip install?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, we can like we need to establish this release on new repo. Like one thing that I want to avoid, like have the same image stack, right, for SDK. So one of the
Yeah,
options would be if we all agree that Kubeflow SDK is the right thing for us, we can just publish to PyP from this repo. Um, right? You know, we can make the 0.0.1 release or 0.1 release actually, right? And publish it just to PyP from this repo. Um,
Francisco, you'd like to
yeah,
add
yeah,
something?
go, go, Francisco.
Uh, what's uh, you said that if we agree that it's the right thing for the SDK, and I guess like the is that a controversial? Is that an unknown
Yeah,
thing?
so I think we need to formal vote on the KC at least, right? So we kind of agree that we have this repo, right? And you know, I don't receive any controversial topics. Like it's only questions about how we're going to keep, synchronize the backends, right?
Yeah,
But as long as we can figure out it, it should be fine, right? Um,
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, good.
The backend synchronization. So there's what I think would. I mean, if you want to talk about other things, feel free to interrupt. Maybe I also could share some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think only my question for the backend synchronization. So two things, right? First of all, on the OpenAPI spec. So today we maintain this Swagger under Qflow trainer,
Hmm.
and this we use this Swagger to actually generate models,
Yeah,
right? So the trick is like we have to maintain the entire Kubernetes spec here. Not the entire, but basically the dependency in our APIs. Uh,
yeah.
so my question is like when we're going to, for example, tomorrow implement like other optimizer SDK, right? Like which is Katib. Like, are we planning to maintain a big Swagger for the entire Kubeflow, or it will be separate? Like,
Yeah, I don't think that I'm sure like I guess how I would say it is we probably aren't the only person that has collapsed APIs or together, and so probably there's a way for us to make the Swagger UI a little bit more manageable while also, encompassing both of the APIs. But I think like that's a thing we could look into. I can probably look into that. Go ahead, Todd.
yeah, yes, that go ahead.
Yeah,
Um,
just a quick question. Like, it depends on how we're planning to put the Kubeflow SDK at the end. Are we planning to allow people to just do from models import or from Kubeflow.models import Katib models or import trainer model or from models or from Kubeflow.trainer dot models import X? Like how we're going to namespace it because that could make a little bit of a difference. So we can keep them as separate files and generate models in different places
yeah,
or
so yeah, that makes sense. So from my perspective, we should not even expose models API to users.
okay.
Models should be fully internal, and we should only expose the types to the users, which we have here, right?
Yeah. So these types are based on the models,
Yeah,
or it
so
doesn't.
yes, some of them based on the models, some of actually types actually the user facing APIs they can interact with, right?
Yeah.
Models is like Kubernetes API. We don't want to expose Kubernetes API to the SDK user, right? Um,
Yes, I agree.
the models is used right now in the cloud. I mean, at least I know KFP had like it performs differently, but on the trainer side, right? Like we use models to create CRDs, right? Um, for example, here we're creating train job and we importing the train job CRD from models. So it's fully internal, not user facing, right?
So I'm just thinking out loud here with the local execution mode. Like, if we're going with this as well, would we make the local execution as a standalone, or not a standalone, like as a framework or as a mechanism to run or to test local execution with the Kubeflow itself? So my idea is like with the Kubeflow SDK, there might be some common functionality across all the entire SDKs or the clients that we're going to ship to the SDK. So we keep that to the core SDK. So Kubeflow SDK would kind of serve maybe authentication authorization if we have a standard across libraries. It could also provide like it doesn't have to be the old proposal, which is like from Kubeflow SDK as like a big namespace or a big class that will initialize others, but it could be like offering local execution would just say, hey, we have local process here, mechanism of running
We might
stuff.
want to
Yeah,
hold
go
off
ahead.
on that until
Okay.
later.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Sorry
can talk.
for
Yeah, yeah.
interrupting.
I understand your points. Are like you're talking about like one client or like separate clients and how it affects local. Let's talk about like once we discuss the local execution. That makes
Cool.
sense.
Yeah,
Uh,
perfect.
yeah, but I think in general, it could be maybe next step after optimization. How we can merge these models to the single one because eventually, if we're going to duplicate them, the only cons is the size of the package will increase, right?
Right. Well, and
Mm.
so I think Saad did mention this in that Kubeflow escape. Like you
Mhm.
can you can manage that with Python extras, and UV allow you to handle that pretty
Yeah,
nicely.
I think another idea could be to serve this as a library, right? And install this, like the models, like solve models by itself as a library. I think KFP is like performs this, right? KFP doesn't use Kubernetes model, Kubernetes like CRD, but it serves the gRPC APIs, right, as a library.
Mm,
And then I think it uses it within the KFP client. Um, so one of the idea could be serve these models as a library for every project, like Kubeflow Trainer, Kubeflow Katib, or Kubeflow Optimizer, right? And then when we install them, it allows us to import this
mm.
from the library, right? That's also might be. Yeah, I think there are several things we can do there. Like, yeah, but I think for now, like just to make a release, we can publish it as it is, and then if we want to decouple models from SDK to reduce size, we can always do it, right?
Yeah, I would recommend that. I mean, oftentimes when people are in the training domain, they usually have expectations with some larger requirements anyways, because sometimes they'll actually
Yeah,
pull some data down or the model artifact actually to the client, right?
yeah. I think figure out like what is the size maybe of the models directory also will be helpful. So let me make a note. Um, yeah, the size of models, and also we can maybe serve to deploy publish models as a library. I think like the only differences right now on the SDK side is the KFP does something different. It interacts with I know it has its own authentication model, not like
Mhm.
via Kubernetes API. So this I think we should also talk about, um, like whether we want to change it or we want to support multiple authentication models for different clients, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think like the most important thing right now for us to make a release, at least for the backend. So at least we release the 2.0 of Q4 Trainer, and we can maybe publish it as part of a manifest, so people can start to finally use it and build something on top. So maybe quick talk about what are the features we need to merge ASAP. One question I have for this big work we're doing with Xiao around Torchtune and blueprints. Um, I don't see Xiao in the call here. Yeah, no, he's not here. But maybe I just want to hear what community think. Do we want to include this as part of first release? Maybe Yuki, if you have your perspective to talk about it from the maintainer point of view. Um,
Yeah, sure.
what's
So yeah, maybe this touching feature is nice to have for the first our release, but not must to have. I think the must to have feature is uh revisiting train job conditions type name change, because the name changes does not have backward compatibility. So before we want to finalize it, I mean, before we release, we want to finalize uh, uncompatible API change.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you think we still requires to do some API changes for condition?
Yeah,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly, we already have pull request.
Hmm. Do you remember the issue number somewhere?
Which is, oh, I see, 2464 maybe.
Six- 2464.
Pull request number.
Oh,
Pull request number.
um,
This is issue page. I mean pull request.
oh, can you post it in the chat? So,
This one.
oh, 2464. Okay. Oh, it's already PR, right? All right, I see. Oh, I see. So yeah, like basically have this condition for initialized, right, rather than created. Yeah, yeah. So that makes sense. And why we don't do this? Because we want to decouple the initialization step from actually creation step, right?
No, actually, so we just replace the current condition type. I mean, so this is just a renaming.
Mm-hmm.
This does not try to change any semantics, just
Mm-hmm.
rename.
Mm-hmm. And initialized, it's not like for model initialization, right? It's something else, right?
This PR try to add to condition type, but
Mm-hmm.
as we mentioned in this PR comment, I do not think so.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we want to just replace created condition type with component created. This is
Mm-hmm.
just for improving user experience, for API visibility. Maybe Anthony has any context.
Do you feel it like do we see a lot of value like to change created to component created for train job? Like what are the main user benefits? Um,
Um, yeah, I guess we describe the reason why we want to do in the dedicated issue. So
okay.
let me find issue. Oh, issue number is 2459.
I see. So yeah, so basically we want to add this condition only after we kind of create all those steps or components, right? So on SDK we call this steps, right? On the controller we call this component right now, right? Or objects we create, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So do you in Kubernetes like but in Kubernetes like they don't have this, right? Like in jobs, right? Like when they create, for example, when we have this PVC template in stateful sets, we don't have additional condition to create persistent volume claims. Do
You mean core API for Kubernetes?
Yeah, yeah, like we don't really have this condition to say that the persistent volume claim is created, right?
I do not remember that.
Yeah, like my only question, like, do we like, is it like user requirements to have this thing, like, differences between the created and components created stage, right? Um,
No, I do not mean we want to add to type condition. I
yep.
mean we want to replace created with component create or
Yeah, but
initialize.
but then I guess we still need to have this created. But what will be the condition between when train job is created but components are not created? Like, do we need to have immediate
Uh,
condition?
Currently, we do not handle the state. Actually, this current created condition will be added when all components are created.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this condition between this stage, like, do we want to have another condition? Um,
Yeah, technically yes.
mm,
But we can reconsider that after the first release.
okay, I see.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sure, Sat. Like, we definitely talk about. So, Yuki, like, what is next step? Okay, do we see this as a blocker? Like, I see proper, pros and cons for both of these approaches. Um, but like, I just, um, I'm not sure if we don't decouple ourselves a lot from the job and other Kubernetes, custom source definitions, um, unless we really see the value of this, right? Um,
Uh,
because previously, yeah,
Actually, this created condition does not mean created,
yep.
creating a train job. This indicate components created, right?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, Anthony, go ahead. Like, do you have any suggestions on this?
Yeah, just my take on that. I think there are two separate aspects. There is the one that is about the, as Yuki said, like the renaming the existing condition, which is a bit misleading in the sense that it says created, while the actual train job is created, obviously, in Kubernetes. So that's one thing. And then the initialized aspect, I think generally from what I can tell, maybe we could review that a little bit more in detail, but generally,
Mhm.
even in core Kubernetes types, you have a condition that says at least, okay, it's been reconciled once. Um, at least the operator is up and running. It has reconciled the resource, and not just like the resource got created and nothing happened. So that's the other thing, and that was the purpose, I guess, to say component created, because that's the first main step for the first like reconciliation loop. Um, Initialized would be good, probably. I would say I don't know, PVC. I think for the condition you have one when you've created it, and it's that depends on actually the type, if it's immediate or lazy, the bound. But then you have another when it's actually bound, the PVC.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think, Antonio, I was talking about volume climb templates when
oh,
basically,
okay,
yeah, when this part of stateful sets. I don't think stateful sets introduce condition which represents when this PVC template is being created. Um, that is why I was kind of like a little bit uncertain whether we want to have a different condition for components created. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, do we have any other maybe users of training operator who can speak up and explain their concerns with these conditions?
I just have a quick question around conditions. Is it different from one runtime to another, or it is exactly the same across runtimes?
Yeah, it's condition on the train job, right? Not on the runtime. So runtime doesn't have any condition as of today.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, so the thing is, like, when we create a train job in Kubernetes, we also need to create an objects like job sets, config map, secrets, and other things. So the goal of changing created to components created to only add this condition once we deploy all these workloads. Um, Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, Yuki, like, because it's like, do you see any kind of customer or user request why you think created is not sufficient? Like sub object.
I,
Yeah. Hmm.
actually, I did not get any feedback from any users.
Hmm. Shall we postpone it like to the 2.1? I understand like it will be a breaking change.
Yes.
But maybe we can, mitigate it to say that our API is in alpha, right? So I'm still kind of think will be more changes in the future. Um,
Yeah. If we are okay to
yeah.
break API, yeah, we can postpone it
We
after
can
the
we
first release.
could we remove it basically? I mean, not introducing. Basically, it seems like we are saying the semantic, or I mean, the name is misleading.
Hmm.
Is it really necessary, like, to introduce it now? In the sense that if we don't introduce it and we introduce it later, like in 2.1, it won't break. It solved the problem of backward compatibility.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, go ahead.
when we remove this created condition type, we have some problems. W- um, so I can easily imagine we so we cannot expose any information. The reason why train job create what the reason why train job does not create any sub resources like job set or secret config maps, anything else. So I mean, users cannot obtain information. The
Yeah.
reason.
So I would say we just have to find a good name for it. Then
Yes.
Yeah. After
Yes. Ideally, yes.
I think so. I think we need another condition after created before complete, right? So we need this condition. We don't want to use running, I guess, right? Um, like we don't want to use running because it's misleading, as we discussed before. Um, but maybe we want to introduce another condition, which is after train job is created and before train job is complete or failed, right? What do you think about it, Yuki? Like,
Yeah. Um, yeah, actually, so we have constraints the order
mm,
of creation between training runtime and train job.
mhm,
But um, if train job does not have um, appropriate parameters, appropriate parameters, something like volume or some else, uh, maybe job creation might fail, right?
mm. So you mean like if some of those, if for example, like user wants to attach PVC, and if PVC does not exist, we don't really tell anything to the train job status, right? Like one of the examples, if a template or runtime has this PVC template, but if
Yes.
PVC doesn't exist, user doesn't really understand like whether. So yeah, I think like we can mitigate it via the reasons, right? Or I think we're doing this right now. We put the condition, the we have reason, right? We have also like the status, right? If I remember correctly. Um, Let me show you. So it's called message, right? Shall we just propagate the message to the statuses, right?
Message is human readable status, and the
Yeah.
type is machine readable status. So
Yeah.
those
So
have
yeah,
different
yeah.
object.
Yeah. So the type could I think right now we put this in the type, right? This components created type, if I remember correctly. Um,
Current our condition type is created instead of component created.
Yeah. But what do we put in the status? Sorry, in the type, and also in the not in the type, in the reason and in the message. What do we put in the reason?
Job set reason.
Job set reason, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we should just introduce another condition between created and complete still. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, otherwise.
So
Mhm.
can you clarify the reason why we want to keep having a created condition?
Yeah, like so create, yeah, like I just don't want us to decouple from the job sets, right? Because like if we put components created, what we put in the first condition when job is submitted on the initialized, right? We need to find a condition for this type, right?
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
I think one feedback is that created is a bit confusing, like, because the resource that you read that says it's created, it's obviously created, like in Kubernetes. It's
Okay.
it's an implicit like state when it has to be created for anything that happened next.
Okay.
So that created state like that's in the diagram. It's ready for the component, not for the train job itself.
Yeah, that makes
And,
sense.
and hence the suggestion was to maybe name it like component created, because that's what exactly it is. But
Yeah.
maybe it's
Yeah.
not a nice so initialized. If we consider that once the component are created, we consider the train job initialized. That could
Mm-hmm.
have been
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do we have any kind of like similar semantic in other, what others are doing in, Nargo or in Istio or in, in Kubernetes, I think in jobs we have only created and complete, right? Uh, yeah, okay, I think we can maybe talk this offline. So let me also take a look like what others are doing. I agree with your concern, Yuki and Antonio. Like I think maybe we should change it before release. I will try to see like what others as well are doing there, and maybe we can make a note there. Any other like must-have from your perspective we should have before release?
So I think I think we have two nice to have for the first release. One is adding validations to
Mm-hmm.
prohibit to prevent training runtime changes after the train job is created.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we can change training runtime parameters even after we create train job, because um, so if during runtime any parameters is changed after train job created, I guess significant disruption happened for
Mm-hmm.
against train job, right?
Do we have an issue for this,
So
like make it immutable? Yeah.
sorry.
Do we have a tracking issue for it that you're talking about? Like,
No, not yet. So yeah, I should create a tracking issue. This is one nice to have feature. And another nice to have feature is implementing finalizer for training runtime. This is similar to another feature. Currently, so we can remove training runtime even though train job specify the training runtime. So
okay,
this is the
okay.
same problem.
So basically, like, it doesn't allow user to delete runtime when train job is created, right?
Yes. And so if train job is suspended or
Yeah.
was finished, we can allow to delete training runtime maybe, but
Okay.
we can consider some situations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of some sort of, statuses. Like I think we talked a little bit about this in when we architect this, right? Like, we still need
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
statuses on the training runtime. Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense. That makes sense. I think another things about pod spec overrides. I think I can imagine use cases when this might be useful. Um, I don't know, like
Yes.
I can try to implement it before release. Like one of the particular example, like for example, if you want to mutate specific things to the train job without your custom controller, right now we're just gonna do anything, right? Um, so I feel like the pod spec.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if I remember correctly, your teammate take this issue. What is the
Yeah.
progress?
Yeah. So I can discuss with Shravan on this. He was out last week. Otherwise, I can try to implement it by myself if I have time this month.
Yeah, but this is needed for a design document before implementation. So I guess this
Yeah.
takes a lot of time. Uh,
Do you
so
feel like
maybe
do you feel there is like a lot of design we need to talk about? We can just update job set plugin to, inject values and that's it.
I think
Right.
my opinion, at least we want to clarify which fields are propagated to which training runtime field.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we have so many overriding propagation mechanism, so we want
Mhm.
to all
Okay. Okay, yeah, let me sense. I can create a draft design to also ping Shravan on to discuss it. Or
yes.
anything else? Sorry. Anything else? Sorry, I just unfortunately clicked to the different button to unmute. Yeah, so there are also some other improvements for unit testing. All this nice to have, right? Not must have. Right? Um, Anything else we're missing from 2.0, 2.1 release, 2.0 actual release of trainer?
What about Kubernetes 1.32 supporting? Actually, we have PR, but contributor
Hmm.
does not have any progress in currently.
Oh yeah. So let me. So this one you mean, right?
Yeah.
This is actually this. Let me put this to the milestone. 132. Yeah, I will. Let me think him. Anything else other than 132?
In my side, I do not have anything.
So for MPI, all this enhancement we've been talking about with you, Yuki, do you think it can be done in 2.1? Like this HTTP server to avoid these restarts and other things. For MPI, there are a lot of kind of right now uncertainty, right? On the resource part, like resource per.
Yeah, good point. Um, that depends on the deadline for P2.0.
Mhm. So I'm
Yeah.
actually planning to again to cut it like sometime end of this month or early May. I'm wondering, do you think you might have time to find out? So API, I have two problems, right? So one is like it's not allowed to create a runtime without nodes, only with launcher. And right now also we cannot propagate the resources per node, right, to the job set.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What do you think? What is your timeline on this? Do you think you can work on this, or you cannot commit right now on this?
Yes, we can. So I want to prioritize so open source project. So before we decided to implement this feature, we want to define deadline. So I want to work on open source project based on deadline.
Yeah, I think like, if you can at least create an issue for us so we can add it to a milestone, I think it will be super helpful, right?
Yes, sure.
All right. Anything else before we jump to the local execution? Right, sounds great. So yeah, Sad, do you need to share your screen or?
I made the document public, so you probably can exit. I'll keep the link here.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, so what we want to do here is local execution. We started an implementation with Podman, or which is like similar to Docker. So we now have a very roughly working example on using distributed training on local Docker like if you have a Docker machine or you have a Docker running locally on your host node, you can literally get that like working on your machine. So the idea of local execution is for the data scientists and machine learning engineers. They will just like structure their job, and once the job is ready, they will just like test it locally. Everything is okay. They can move ahead um, and just like submit it to the trainer. Uh, so the idea also is like to implement something similar to this one, which is 1 second. Like this, like if you look at the end of the file.
You want me to scroll down?
Yeah, please.
This one or
Like the very end. So
okay.
like here, like the Python snippet, like if you look at the code, you can just say like, okay, I'd like the worker to be Docker, but the default worker would be like Kubernetes, which is similar to other components that give similar user experience for running locally. And with the worker, which is here Docker, like we can get a local runtime definition, which is exactly similar to the runtimes that are available in the trainer. And what it will do, it will just use the image from the Docker runtime implementation um, and run this locally on your machine. If everything is okay, you're happy with the training and experimentation, you can just move ahead and get it done. You can also like configure your torch tuning or your parameters to make it like, okay, I just would like to get one epoch running locally or two epochs. If these are running or working fine, we can just move ahead and submit it to the trainer with a higher number of epochs and do a proper training job. So it's just a way of validation, and we can also work after that on implementing some process, but that will be maybe later. If we can get this with the release of 2.0, that will be a huge thing
So
that we can
yeah.
advertise.
So a few questions. So can we make it
Sure.
consistent with KFP local execution?
We can, but to make it consistent with that's another story, another whole big thing that we can discuss it maybe after the 2.0. And the idea is if we can make the Kubeflow SDK, again, like the Kubeflow SDK, once we migrate, if we're going with this, we just make a common library or a common section in the Kubeflow SDK to manage workers. You'd like to run this on Kubernetes, which would be the default for the SDK, but we can also support sub-process as a local execution mode. Then KFP and trainer Katib, any other component would just like instantiate that and use it as a worker to run their jobs, to validate their jobs locally before they submit it to
But
the
should it
trainer
be
or the component in
should
Kubernetes.
it be part of the clients, or you feel like it should be part of API?
If we keep it in the API, you mean like the trainer API? Because if we
No, the
that
trainer,
defies the whole
like
purpose.
basically when you initialize the client, because if I remember correctly, in KFP, it's part of the client's
Yes, it's in the client KFP.
Okay.
User guide.
user guides. So
Then local right there, yeah. So you initialize this, and then you can
Cool.
as you scroll down, you can see Andre a little bit further. There's the actual init. So this is like in your main script or whatever, you would just execute this and you know, it'll work. They offer a Docker or sub process. I think, you know, and you can use a virtual environment, or you can just use your default current active environment, which actually has some really nice benefits. We've been playing around with it quite a bit on our side, and there's some work that happy to talk about how we've managed to use KFP local with Llama Stack as well for actually you know, running like local torch tune jobs, just using native PyTorch, and it being really powerful. And it's kind of thematically similar with some stuff in that space. I think there to get the symmetry with pipelines is incrementally probably a bit more. And I think it would probably make the most sense at the point where we were able to actually integrate the KFP SDK into the Kubeflow SDK, which we know we got confirmation from the KFP folks, Google and Red Hat, and I believe even Capital One, that they're interested in seeing that happen.
So can I ask one question? So on the KFP side,
Sure.
right, like how this task or pipeline has been propagated to the client. So this is the client we initialize, right? Like where like the pipeline creation here.
So what do you mean, like the
Like
pipeline?
basically, so because in the pipeline, right? Like when you want to create the pipeline, you basically need to create the pipeline from your function, right? You need to compile it to to IR to immediate
Yes.
representation and then create it, right?
Yes.
Like this. But in the local mode, like where this API lives.
In local mode, it's just a Python, a sub process, or you execute it into Docker. Let me pull up the code for it.
Okay, so basically when you run this, it will check like what client has been initialized.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
It depends on what you've initialized.
Okay,
Yeah.
so so it checks basically on the runtime and then it just run it like on the Docker or locally.
Yeah, correct. Because you initialize it. You're explicitly initialized, and that you know.
It makes sense. Uh, so I think like the only question is like, can we? So first of all, so one question: do we need to? We don't use CRDs right there, right? We kind of replicating all the APIs in this local client, right? I believe that you have your fork, right? Like of trainer, we can take a look.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. In the first PR, and I think there's yeah, that should give an indication. We're just like implementing an MVP, literally, not a fully
yep.
working demo. We're cleaning it up, and we can propose it directly to the trainer if that's okay.
So we
And
still go
that
good.
that would be consistent. That would be consistent with your suggestion earlier. If we would like to make the models as a dedicated library, then you can have local runners. Kubernetes will be one runner or one like worker, and then if you need these, it will be only available for Kubernetes runner, which would be like the default. Would
Mm.
kind of, but it is not an optional, but it available. It's only being used by the Kubernetes runner, which would be like the default execution mode for the Kubeflow SDK if you need to use it that way. But again, once we can do it for the trainer just for the sake to see, and we test if it's gonna work okay. We gather comments, we gather user feedback, and also when we add the KFP, we'll have enough evidence and enough like requirements. So when we add KFP, it will be like, okay, we need to support this for the trainer, and we need to support this for Katib or optimizer. And then if KP comes, we'll try to blend it together and make a single place in Kubeflow SDK where we can have local execution mode for all components available. So it's a good trial period, I would say, for 2.0.
So so local execution require for you to rewrite all the APIs, right? You can reuse some of the common libraries, but not everything, right? For example, yeah, go good. Like CRD,
Yeah,
you don't need to use it, right?
no, we don't need CRDs at all, even runtimes. We try to implement it with the minimal disruption way possible. So if we're keeping the trainer client, we're adding a local execution or local trainer client, but implementation is just a detail. Like we can change it a little bit, not to disturb or not to make like a big disruption for the existing SDK interface or whatever we call it.
I understand. So it's kind of like still completely different orchestration, right? We don't use backend components, right? But it's kind of like using the same APIs on the user side, right? So user doesn't really see these differences, right?
Exactly. Yes.
But user will lose all this, advanced scheduling things we give them with Kubernetes. Because I guess, like for example, with
But so
new, yeah,
yeah, like for sure, right? I think like the point isn't to try to get users to do distributed training heavily reliant on Docker or
hmm
Podman, but it's more to um, onboard more users more easily to distributed training rather than and get them to actually getting to using,
yeah, yeah. Because like in general for KFP, I see a lot of value of local execution. I think we're also like exploring a lot on this because I creating my simple tasks. I want to quickly run the pipeline with them, and I don't even maybe need the GPU. uh, on a distributed training side is different because you require a lot of machinery around your jobs, right?
but actually, and I know this because I've trained large models quite a lot in my past. sometimes you just want to make sure that like your custom PyTorch implementation, whatever, just works right on a couple epochs before you actually do it on a large volume of
Yep.
data that's going to take like a full weekend. And see if you can fail fast earlier on before actually kicking off full training. And this really reduces the barriers to entries to that.
But the problem is like running PyTorch on Mac and running PyTorch on GPUs, so, you know, on NVIDIA GPUs, it's different things, right? You know, it requires different backends.
Correct. And I think this is allowing users to kind of swap between that in a way that, again, doesn't give you a full symmetry, but it gives you an approximation enough to get started.
So if I may interrupt in here, Andre, even yourself, you have been using the local execution mode without having a local execution mode. And by that, I mean, if you
Yeah.
go to the notebooks,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
try
exactly.
to run the local process first to make sure the code works, then
Yep.
you submit it to trainer.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. This is like what our users like doing. I mean, they're doing as well. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I agree. It's like about like what experience we want to give them. You know, what are the differences between using our local execution and just executing their function, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are the like? Is it the containerization part we kind of taking care of, or
So, okay, if you think about it, there's so many benefits or so many different things we can talk about it here. For the local execution mode, implementing it on Docker will give you the fully distributed mechanism. You can see a distributed training happening even with a single epoch with no GPUs. You can just make it them very minimal and see if everything is working, and then you change the tuning configuration or the configuration, and then everything works perfectly normal. If you run with sub-process, you're not getting any distributed at all. So you're lacking this, and also it's a bit cleaner. The Kubeflow SDK doesn't have any dependency on Torch or Torch tune. So if you don't have to install Torch, sub-process might require you to install Torch and get on into like Torch configuration and all that kind of stuff. But if you're running in Docker, you're exactly taking the same exact runtime definition, the same exact image, test it to make sure the image is working. Once you do that locally, you make sure your runtime image is working. Your code is working perfectly okay with the distribution, with the like fully distributed mode, and then you can just like resubmit that on the trainer and make sure everything is going to be working and you have no problem with your code at all.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it'll be like for MPI, it will be problematic to do.
Mm-hmm.
For MPI, because we require to create host files, right?
Yeah.
So I don't
It's
know.
not gonna work from day one for every single runtime. For
Mm.
most runtimes, I think it's gonna be fine for Torch, which is
Yeah,
most widely used.
yeah, that's right. But you just need to make sure also like the images support your Arc, right? Like, you know, it can run
Yeah.
on macOS, for example.
Well, with Docker, you can request a platform. That's
Yeah.
also another thing. You can set the platform and it will be working. I'm not sure exactly if everything in the process will be working till the end. That's another thing we can test to make
Mhm.
sure like the arc is not a problem. When you run a Docker image, you can say dash dash platform and you set the platform of the image.
Mhm.
And if I remember what I heard recently, NVIDIA GPUs will be moving to an ARM-based images
Mhm.
very soon. So I think the world will be moving towards more ARM-based.
Yeah, exactly. And so do you feel like we need to duplicate all the APIs on local mode? Like, for example, in the demo that we've done with Yuki, I created an API to inspect runtime, for example, which prints the packages and also the version of Python. Uh, do you feel like we need to replicate all the APIs or part of it?
With Docker, that can be done pretty easily because you can just like spin and run a single Docker container, execute a single command in it, get all the runtime definition, and that
Mm.
would be it. We don't have to do a lot of magic. With sub-process, it's going to be tricky a little bit because sub-process you might need to install everything before
Yeah, I understand this.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
different.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, with sub process things get a lot more complicated, right? I think like, um, for sure. I think it's how much do we want to invest in a good user experience, and then like what's the incremental yield? I think like, the Kubernetes requirement is a big bottleneck. Moving it to Docker, that actually still opens up quite a lot of enough to where I think that ends up adding a lot of value. I wouldn't say that we would need to implement every API. Um, in fact, like I'd probably discourage it only because, um, we want to emphasize like this is, to really help users get started. Like in Feast, we implement everything locally for online and offline, and our registry, and it backs it with the SQLite and Milvus Lite for RAG stuff. And it's great for people getting started to have a low friction developer experience. But for doing the real stuff, we don't want to like over invest into it. And candidly, if users start saying that like, oh, actually, we do want these APIs in local mode, that would be a good signal that like, oh, look, they're using it. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. So like we basically want to collect initial user feedback and discuss it. Like I know we're time, so just 1 minute, one small question. So how do you view this works with KFP? Like because if you don't talk about distributed training, you don't even need trainer, right? The
Right.
benefit of trainer are multi-node, right? And all
Yes.
these orchestrations. Like, any thoughts on this? Um,
Yeah, I think with KFP, like you mean the integration between KFP and the local execution mode that we
yeah,
have,
how
if
we can
KFP can.
guide users what they should use, right? Like if they all just want to test PyTorch, right? Like how we should guide them.
Yeah, I think on this one, at least my own thinking, and as I understand the question, users should be just like demonstrating if their code is going to be working, if the distributed training and like different chunking and everything is working as expected, the epochs would be working fine. And then if that's okay, you can resubmit the whole thing to the trainer. If you're running from KFP, I think KFP still supports all of this. Francisco, if you have more context, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, within KFP, we have work that we're starting to focus on to improve this experience as a whole,
Mhm.
particularly the local mode transition to remote. So that's one thing, and that's independent of the trainer. I mean, I understand the future state of the Kubeflow SDK being merged together, and it's like, okay, well then that becomes a trainer problem too. But like, what I say is that there are multiple things here that all kind of have to happen in parallel for us to get better UX. And for KFP, it's a lot around exposing a lot of the persistent volume declarations in the client, which
I
don't make
think yeah. So I
but
think it's long. Yeah.
one last
Go ahead,
thing,
Go
and
ahead.
but the the point at which you go from like local, like a KFP local execution to like distributed training, like, well, that won't make sense, right? Like it wouldn't make sense to run KFP local and distributed training. Um, I mean, like maybe it could, but like I don't think that's the right mechanism. We want both there to be symmetry between like, you're running, KFP local actually using Kubernetes to actually spin up all of your components, and then the trainer you would actually run, in distributed training.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel that, as long as user need to do more than one step, they should go to KFP, right?
Yeah.
They just want to do torch training. Okay, they can use trainer. That's it, right? But if they, for example, want to do uh, torch plus, serving or Spark plus
Oh
torch,
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
need
yeah.
to
Yeah.
use
So I
KFP.
thought I thought that was I thought you were
Yeah,
asking
but
about how we
I
can
think
make.
like it's not how KFP has been envisioned the project for like many, years, because KFP by itself self-contained,
Yep.
and as long, I mean, if you don't really require a lot of, distributed compute, which we've done in training operator historically, and all this orchestration. But I think like with this discussion of SDK, we need to understand like what is the right experience for user, right? Because we have many clients, how these clients can work together, and we don't really duplicate efforts, right? Probably one thing to also, think about, if that makes sense, right?
Oh,
Um, like when KFP and when trainer should be used together, right? Like I mean, for example, like I start with trainer client, kick off my torch job, then I kick off my distributor job, then I need to, combine more kind of complex ML pipeline. KFP comes to the picture and help you to stitch these pieces together, right?
yeah.
Yes, Hadi, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I think, Andrew, it's vital if we can get this. It's important if we can get this before we integrate. We put all the clients together in a single SDK, and the reason is we need to we need to identify and understand what would be the requirements for the trainer to work locally, and then when we go to like integrating with KFP, we know like, okay, we probably the runner can't work like this, or we have to have this feature or this enabled so the trainer can work along with KFP. Again, I'm just like, there might be no issues at all, no conflict or anything like that, but it's an experimentation or experimental phase that we can use with a local trainer, not local trainer, local training or local
Yep.
execution, and then we see if it's good, if it's bad, if we need it, if we don't need it. It's a good way to understand before we merge or we put everything together with a Kubeflow SDK.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. I think it's great. Like sadly, we also like from your customer perspective, like they usually try to run it locally, not in the notebook, right? Not in the cloud ID.
Yeah,
Just
if
Mhm.
go ahead. Sorry, Francisco, go.
Well, so what we do hear people run like talk about it from the notebook setting quite a bit, but you actually have to connect your training cluster to your notebook to actually set that up. So there's some like, and it's not a lot of work, but there's work, and so
Okay.
that's like friction, right? Um,
I think we should continue to talk about it. Like, I would love to learn more from your experience, like, because we also see a huge need for people to experience something quicker locally, because right now I have advanced machines, like you can run, even in your local mic, you can run, billion parameters of models, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like it's even with Torch. Torch supports NPS backend, and
And
it's
people are starting to use these, I mean, like,
yeah,
LoRa and models are getting smaller, right? Like
yep,
Hugging Face released
yeah,
135 million parameter
yeah,
models. So if we can't have an answer for like doing local training to going to larger scale training with a fluid experience, I think we're just um, we're missing out on an opportunity to get adoption. You heard what the VLM folks are doing with quantized aware
yep.
inference, and so like there's long history of quantized aware training too, and people trying to get smaller bits, right? If that's the thing.
And so you don't see using kind to minikube for this local
No,
execution.
absolutely not, man. Like just data scientists don't like they barely know Docker. They and it's not a
But if
criticism.
if the abstract like this, like, do you still see like we just need to rely on Docker directly? Like,
So that's a
Well,
good
that's
question, but
also.
hmm,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
kind itself will rely on Docker or a
yep,
backend to
yep,
do that. So we're just adding
right.
another layer again on top of Docker. So if we can do it with Docker in distributed fashion, that's a proper way to do it. And if you do it in kind with all that kind is great, but setting it up locally might be dazzling a little
Yeah,
bit for
yeah.
data
So yeah.
scientists.
So you require for you to install trainer control plane or KFP control plane, even to keep this off, right? Which is kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
But for pipelines, it's really just pip install Kubeflow and people can start. And what we
yeah,
see
yeah,
from our
yeah.
side is customers use that. You
Yeah,
know,
I would love to learn more. Like, I think it's a great actually. I think it's extremely powerful because you don't require this Kubernetes complexity, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So there are
right.
two things. Let's do the following, if that's okay with you, Andre. We will try to create a PR in the trainer itself with the implementation that we have implemented for the local execution mode, so we can review it there, and we'll also have the document. We'll keep adding content to the document and we'll review it as an official proposal for local execution. How does that
Yeah, yeah.
sound?
So I think it's so. So do you want to create this in trainer or in SDK in your repo? Like once we migrated the code, like what is your timeline on this? Like, what do you think?
Well, we have a working implementation of local training locally, so we can literally clean it up and put it for
Shall we start with the proposal
sure.
and we can put the on the cap, and then for your code we can decide like on the timeline, then we can decide where we will put an SDK repo or on the trainer directly first, right?
Okay, it's actually a couple of people working on this, so we were we're kind of doing everything in parallel. So we'll make things available and we can review them in any order we think is the right order. So if that's okay, like the implementation is not going to be a big difference from X to Y, in my humble opinion. And the proposal is like we agree on what's going to be available, what we're going to implement. If we implement more, that's great. If we implement less, we'll have to get the difference. And yeah, that's hopefully it.
Yeah, sorry for keep you late. I think it's great. Thank you
No
so much,
worries.
Sat and Francisco, for working on this. Like, we also see a huge need on this, local execution. I think it's the right thing for us overall to move forward. So I definitely agree. Any last questions, comments?
no, if folks that were able to see it, please feel free to give some feedback to Saad and the team. And thank you all for seeing this and for the great work here, Saad. I think like um the earlier we can get,
Mm.
user feedback about like, hey, look, is this directionally right, or are people not interested in this? I think that's actually quite informative, and so I think that's that's useful signal.
Yeah, like I think sending this in Kubeflow discuss also helpful. So
I will.
yeah.
I will. Yeah, I was just waiting for this discussion, then I will send it to the mail list so we get more people to.
Yeah, for us, it's like, for KFP, it's like, high priority, like the local execution. So, it's like definitely, we should push this forward. All right. Thank you guys so much. So
Sure.
see you in 2 weeks, and let's follow up, I think, on the release discussions. Thanks everyone. So speak to you soon.
Bye bye.